You believe that pressure is an external force acting upon you, a chaotic weight imposed by the world. But as Machiavelli observed, the greatest threat to a leader is not the conspiracy outside, but the discord within. Most people mistake silence for strength, yet they are screaming internally. True command is not the absence of pressure, it is the realization that your emotional reaction is a choice you are making against your own interests. To react is to be governed. By the end of this analysis, you will understand why the person who reacts the least emotionally is often the one who maintains the greatest control, and it isn't because they are cold, but because they are strategically clear. Society often suggests that expressing every impulse is authentic. In reality, unchecked expression under pressure is a leakage of power. We misunderstand Machiavellian restraint as deceit in truth. It is the highest form of self-discipline. We examine why your current habits of immediate reaction are actually reinforcements of your own instability. The sensation begins not in your thoughts, but in the subtle tightening of your chest and the sudden acceleration of your pulse. This is the biological preamble to what many people misinterpret these sensations as signs of catastrophe. Before a single word is spoken or a decision made, your nervous system detects a shift in the environment and sounds an alarm. It is a primitive inheritance, a surge of adrenaline designed for survival, yet in the modern landscape, it often functions as a false prophet. In this precise millisecond, you stand at a crossroads between the master and the subject. The untrained mind immediately rushes to provide a script for this physical discomfort, weaving a narrative of urgency and disaster. You tell yourself that the stakes are insurmountable or that the social tension is a threat to your standing. This internal storyteller is remarkably fast, but it is rarely accurate. Consider the mechanics of this ignition. A sharp remark, a looming deadline, or an unexpected confrontation enters your field of perception. Your brain, seeking to protect you, bypasses your higher logic to trigger a defensive posture. If you allow this instinct to lead, you have already surrendered your autonomy to a chemical reaction. Strategic clarity demands that you observe this biological heat without becoming the fuel for the fire. You must learn to witness the rising temperature in your skin and the shallowing of your breath as neutral data points rather than commands for action. The moment you label this physiological state as a crisis, you grant the external world permission to dictate your internal reality. True authority is found in the gap between the stimulus and the story you tell yourself about it. By deconstructing the trigger, you realize that the pressure isn't a solid object. It is a fluid process that you can dismantle through cold, objective observation. When you refuse to participate in the frantic narration of your own fear, the supposed emergency begins to dissolve. You are not suppressing your humanity, you are refining it. You are choosing to operate from the prefrontal cortex, the seat of the strategist, rather than the amygdala, the seat of the fugitive. This is the foundation of internal command, recognizing that while you cannot always control the initial spark, you are the sole arbiter of whether it becomes a conflagration or merely a fading ember. An escalating heartbeat often signals a moment where personal autonomy is at risk of being compromised. Most individuals operate on a hair trigger, allowing every external friction to dictate their immediate temperament. However, true excellence resides in the vacuum between a provocation and your eventual conduct. This interval is where the concept of vert manifests, not as a tool for subjugating others, but as the supreme capacity to remain flexible amidst the unpredictable whims of fortune. By imposing a deliberate 5-second freeze upon your instincts, you effectively dismantle the cycle of reactivity that governs the masses. While those around you are swept away by the current of their own adrenaline, your stillness becomes a fortress of strategic clarity. You are not ignoring the environment, you are refusing to let its turbulence compromise your internal architecture. Consider the profound shift that occurs when you inhabit this brief silence. In that window of time, the emotional charge of a situation begins to evaporate, leaving behind raw data, that can be analyzed with clinical precision. This pause is the ultimate expression of self-sovereignty, transforming a potential crisis into a manageable sequence of variables. You transition from a secondary character reacting to a plot into the deliberate author of your next move. When you wait, you reclaim the energy that others waste on impulsive outbursts, funneling it instead into a calculated and composed presence. The world expects you to flinch, to defend, or to strike back with equal heat. By offering nothing but a focused, observant quiet, you fundamentally reorganize the psychological landscape. This disciplined hesitation allows your intellect to catch up with your physiology, ensuring that your output is a reflection of your long-term objectives rather than a fleeting whim of biology. Mastery is found in this thin slice of time where you decide that your peace is too valuable to be traded for a moment of vented frustration. It is the signature of a mind that has transcended the need for validation, finding its strength in the rigorous governance of its own impulses. In the heat of a confrontation, the human ego creates an elaborate fiction. We look across the room and perceive a nemesis, a judgmental audience, or a hostile force bent on our decline. This mental projection is the primary source of our instability. You are not fighting a person. You are wrestling with the vivid caricature your anxiety has painted. To achieve true psychological poise, you must perform a radical act of intellectual dissection. Strip away the adjectives you've attached to the scenario. Remove the labels of aggressive, intimidating, or disrespectful. What remains is simply a human being standing in a specific posture, emitting sound waves at a certain decibel within a room of fixed dimensions. By reducing a perceived threat to its raw, physical components, you deprive the situation of its power to agitate your spirit. High-stakes environments feel heavy only because we imbue them with personal significance. We imagine that every gaze carries a hidden critique and every silence is a trap. This is a cognitive error that Machiavellian clarity seeks to rectify through clinical detachment. Instead of seeing a social challenge as a test of your worth, view it as a laboratory experiment. The individual speaking to you is merely a collection of biological impulses and learned behaviors, most of which have nothing to do with you. Their intensity is a reflection of their own internal chaos, not a commentary on your value. When you adopt the perspective of an objective observer, you stop being a target and start becoming a technician. You are no longer managing a crisis, you are organizing neutral variables. This shift in perception changes the very geometry of the interaction. If a moment is stripped of its story, the pressure has nowhere to land. You begin to see the mechanical gears of the situation, the timing, the environment, and the objective facts. While others are drowning in the drama of who said what, you are calmly calculating the most efficient path toward your long-term goal. This is not about coldness. It is about the preservation of your mental resources. Every ounce of energy you spend wondering what someone thinks of you is energy stolen from your ability to execute your plan. Social confidence is born the moment you realize that the opinions of others are merely external noise, incapable of breaching the walls of a well-ordered mind. You stand firm not because you are fighting, but because there is no longer anything to fight. You have transformed a battlefield into a chessboard, where the pieces are inanimate, and the only thing that moves is your intent. As you learn to deconstruct the other, you will notice a strange phenomenon. The world begins to feel quiet. The looming shadows of social pressure retreat, because they require your participation to exist. By refusing to narrate the malice of your surroundings, you become the only grounded element in a sea of volatility. This is the ultimate form of self-respect, denying the external world the right to define your internal state. You are left with a clear field of vision, ready to navigate the complexities of life with the precision of a master architect. Every time you surrender to a sudden urge to lash out or defend your ego, you are participating in a hidden transaction that bankrupts your future self. This is the invisible price of a reactive existence. To the untrained eye, an impulsive retort or a heated outburst seems like an isolated event, a temporary lapse in judgment. However, the psychological reality is far more corrosive. You are effectively trading your life's overarching ambitions for a fleeting moment of cathartic release. Consider this a form of cognitive taxation where the interest rates are compounding against your personal authority. When you allow an external stimulus to dictate your immediate behavior, you signal to your own subconscious that your long-term vision is secondary to the comfort of venting a passing frustration. Each instance of lost composure erodes the neural pathways of discipline that you have worked so hard to construct. It is a slow leak in the reservoir of your character. An individual who cannot govern their first impulse remains overly influenced by their environment, a leaf tossed by the shifting winds of other people's moods and accidental circumstances. This instability creates a mental fog that obscures the path toward meaningful achievement. You spend so much energy repairing the damage caused by your reactions, apologizing, overthinking, or managing the fallout, that you have nothing left for the actual pursuit of your goals. This is why many find themselves stagnant, wondering why their progress feels so heavy. They are unknowingly dragging the weight of 1,000 small surrenders to their own emotions. In the realm of strategic self-mastery, tranquility is your greatest asset. It allows for the conservation of mental resources that are otherwise burned in the fires of irritation. When you choose restraint, you are investing in your own sovereign power. You are deciding that your direction is more important than your momentary feeling of being right or respected. This level of detachment isn't about being robotic. It's about being profoundly intentional. It's the realization that the world is full of hooks designed to snag your attention and derail your focus. By refusing to bite, you remain the architect of your own timeline. The short-term relief of letting them have it is a marriage that leaves you thirstier for true respect in the long run. Real status is not granted by the loudest voice in the room, but by the one whose pulse remains steady when the stakes are highest. If you analyze the trajectory of those who have attained a high degree of internal consistency, you will find a common thread. They have mastered the art of the long game. They understand that every provoked response is a distraction orchestrated by the chaos of the present. To remain calm is to stay on course. It is the ultimate act of rebellion against a world that demands your outrage. As you move forward, begin to view your composure as a finite currency. Do not spend it on trivialities. Save it for the moments that truly define the man you are becoming. The question you must ask yourself in every high-pressure moment is simple: is this reaction worth the delay of my ultimate purpose? To navigate the fog of a high-pressure environment, one must possess a mind that functions like a well-organized archives. When the atmosphere grows heavy with noise and conflicting demands, the average individual becomes a victim of cognitive overload, allowing every piece of data to strike them with equal force. This creates a paralysis of will. To avoid this fate, you must adopt the discipline of internal ordering. This is not the act of suppressing your humanity, but rather the systematic categorization of reality as it unfolds. Imagine your consciousness as a sovereign workspace where every incoming observation is assigned a specific priority. Under duress, your primary task is to distinguish between what is essential for your objective and what is merely decorative or distracting. Consider the psychological utility of compartmentalization, reframed as a precision tool for the strategist. In a moment of crisis, your fears about the future or your regrets about the past are irrelevant data points that consume valuable mental bandwidth. You must learn to place these emotional variables into a temporary quarantine, ensuring they do not contaminate the clarity of your current decision-making process. This is the hallmark of an elite temperament, the ability to focus exclusively on the mechanics of the present while keeping the broader vision in a separate, secure chamber of the intellect. When you organize your thoughts with this level of rigor, you stop being overwhelmed by the magnitude of a challenge and begin to see it as a sequence of solvable puzzles. By structuring your internal landscape, you develop a form of intellectual immunity to the chaos of your surroundings. While others are being swept away by the current of their own anxieties, you are calmly sorting through the variables, identifying the lever that will yield the greatest result. This structural clarity allows you to maintain high-level judgment when the stakes are highest, as you are no longer fighting the noise, you are simply ignoring it. True personal authority is the byproduct of this internal order. It is the steady hand that emerges when the mind is no longer a cluttered room of reactive impulses, but a streamlined engine of purpose. This mastery of one's own cognitive architecture is the secret to enduring strength. It transforms the world from a place of overwhelming pressure into a field of clear, actionable information. As you refine this ability to categorize and prioritize, you will find that your presence in any room changes fundamentally. You become the anchor in the storm, not because you are exerting power over others, but because you have attained a total and uncompromising command over the contents of your own mind. This is the foundation upon which all lasting competence is built. The noise will always exist, but for the man who has mastered internal ordering, the sound is nothing more than a distant hum that cannot reach the core of his resolve. In the theater of human interaction, there is a pervasive fallacy that strength is synonymous with movement. We are conditioned to believe that every challenge requires a counter-attack, and every question demands an immediate reply. However, the most sophisticated expression of internal command is often found in the refusal to engage. This is the discipline of calculated stillness. When you encounter a provocation or a high-pressure inquiry, the world expects you to flinch. It anticipates a defensive explanation or a visible display of agitation. By choosing non-action, you disrupt the expected rhythm of the exchange. You are not being passive. You are exercising a form of active restraint that demonstrates your internal environment is not for sale. This lack of reaction acts as a psychological mirror, forcing the opposing party to confront the echoes of their own instability while you remain an unmovable point of reference. Consider the mechanics of a void. When you provide no emotional friction for another person to grip, their momentum has nowhere to land. They are met with a quietude that is far more daunting than any loud rebuttal. This stillness unnerves the impulsive because it suggests a level of self-assurance that does not require external validation. While others are busy filling the silence with nervous energy or justifications, you are conserving your resources and observing the field with detached precision. This is the Machiavellian art of patience, the understanding that by doing nothing, you often allow a situation to resolve itself or reveal its true nature. You are waiting for the sediment to settle so the water becomes clear. In this state of suspension, you gain the ultimate strategic advantage, the ability to see the path forward without the distortion of your own ego's need to be heard. Stillness is the ultimate boundary. It communicates that your peace is a sovereign territory, inaccessible to those who wish to disrupt it for their own entertainment or relief. This practice refines your character by teaching you that you are not a slave to your nervous system's demand for closure. You learn to sit with the discomfort of an unresolved moment, recognizing that your value is not tied to having the last word. This composure is the bedrock of genuine social confidence. It is a quiet authority that doesn't need to shout to be felt. By mastering the power of non-action, you transition from a participant in the chaos to the silent architect of the outcome. You realize that the person who can stay still the longest is usually the one who sees the furthest. This disciplined absence of motion is not a sign of weakness. It is the hallmark of a mind that has already decided it cannot be conquered. As you embrace this calculated silence, you will notice a profound shift in how you process the world. The frantic energy of your surroundings begins to feel distant, almost theatrical. You are no longer a cog in the machine of social reaction. Instead, you are the observer, the strategist, and the final arbiter of your own conduct. This is where true personal liberty begins, in the realization that you have the absolute right to remain silent, to remain still, and to remain entirely yourself regardless of the storm. The transformation of your character begins when you abandon the perspective of the participant and adopt the lens of the analyst. Most men experience high-pressure scenarios as though they are being hunted, feeling like a focal point for every criticism or looming expectation. This sensation of being a target is a psychological trap that keeps you in a state of perpetual defense. To achieve true emotional stability, you must execute a radical mental pivot. You are no longer the one under the microscope. You are the scientist conducting the study. By shifting your vantage point to that of an objective observer, you strip the environment of its ability to wound your pride. You begin to look at a heated negotiation or a social confrontation not as a threat to your identity, but as a complex architecture of human behavior and situational variables. This transition requires you to view every event as a structural puzzle. When a moment feels heavy, ask yourself, what are the mechanics at play here? Instead of asking why this is happening to you, investigate how the situation is unfolding. By focusing on the how rather than the why, you engage your analytical faculties and quiet the primal centers of your brain that generate fear. You become an architect who sees the blueprints of the interaction, the shifting tones, the body language, and the underlying incentives. This detachment is the cornerstone of Machiavellian self-discipline. It allows you to remain upright while others are bent by the weight of their own projections. You aren't avoiding reality. You are seeing it with such extreme clarity that the drama dissolves into data. When you occupy the role of the observer, your self-worth is no longer on the table. You realize that the intensity directed toward you is merely an external phenomenon to be managed, like weather or terrain. This perspective creates an impenetrable barrier between the world's volatility and your internal peace. You stand in the center of the storm, not fighting the wind, but measuring its velocity to determine your next move. This is the essence of personal authority, the recognition that you are the sole designer of your response. While the victim asks for mercy, the observer seeks understanding. By the time the event concludes, the victim is exhausted from the struggle, but the architect is enriched by the insight. This mastery of framing is what separates the man who is governed by his circumstances from the one who navigates them with unwavering direction. It is a quiet, intellectual sovereignty that requires no external permission to exist. As you refine this habit, the very nature of pressure begins to change. It stops being a crushing force and becomes a refining heat. You find a strange sense of liberation in the fact that nothing is personal. Every challenge is simply an opportunity to exercise your ability to perceive without bias and act without ego. The more you practice this shift, the more you will find that the world loses its power to startle you. You are the one holding the compass, and the terrain, no matter how rugged, is merely something to be mapped. The pinnacle of your psychological evolution arrives when you perceive that tension is never a barrier, but a sieve. It is a rigorous mechanism that sifts the resolute from the fickle, identifying who possesses an internal compass and who is merely a reflection of their surroundings. Many individuals spend their lives colliding with external circumstances as if they were immovable obstacles, unaware that these moments are actually opportunities for self-refining filtration. When the weight of expectation or the heat of a conflict intensifies, it serves a singular purpose: to reveal whether your foundations are built upon the shifting sands of public opinion or the bedrock of personal conviction. To be governed by the climate of a room is to exist in a state of permanent subjugation, where every stranger's frown or unexpected setback can derail your entire mission. Consider the profound deficit incurred by a life of instinctive responses. Each time you allow a provocation to breach your composure, you are conscripted into a war you did not choose, fighting on terrain you do not own. This reactive posture is an exhausting, defensive mode of being that leaves no room for genuine creation or forward movement. You become a hollow echo of the world's chaos, perpetually patching holes in a sinking ship of ego. Conversely, the man who cultivates a sovereign mind understands that his silence and his restraint are his most potent assets. He views the surrounding turbulence not as a threat to his safety, but as a test of his mental elasticity. By refusing to let the external storm dictate his internal tempo, he gains the capacity to move through a crisis with the same rhythmic accuracy he would employ on a tranquil dawn. This level of self-governance represents the only authentic dominion available to a human being. While others seek to influence their peers or accumulate symbols of prestige, the strategist recognizes that the true throne is located within the skull. If you cannot regulate your own pulse, no amount of outward success will ever grant you a sense of security. Control over the self is the prerequisite for all other forms of competence. It is the ability to look at a terrifying variable and see only a path to be navigated. This clarity is not a gift bestowed upon a lucky few. It is a hard-won territory conquered through the repetitive denial of petty impulses. You are the sole legislator of your conduct, the only individual with the power to veto a destructive reaction. When you finally embrace this reality, the world stops being a source of fear and starts being a source of fascination. You realize that the pressure everyone else is fleeing is the very element that will temper your spirit. You no longer hope for an easy life. You develop the inner architecture to thrive within a difficult one. This is the moment your shadow stops leading you and your intellect takes the helm. The ultimate victory is not found in the defeat of a rival, but in the total mastery of the man in the mirror. You stand as an island of order in an ocean of volatility, anchored by the knowledge that while you cannot halt the waves, you are the absolute master of your own vessel. This is the quiet intensity of a mind that has found its center, a sovereign state that remains unshakable regardless of the weather. The achievement of a stabilized inner landscape renders the outer environment inconsequential. When your mental state is no longer a hostage to the volatile shifts of the world, you possess a form of freedom that few ever realize. This profound lucidity isn't a miraculous endowment or a stroke of fortune. It is a rigorous, consistent training of the rational mind. It is the result of choosing thousands of times to prioritize your long-term objectives over a momentary emotional itch. By refining your capacity to process high-stakes information without succumbing to the heat of the moment, you build a foundation of competence that remains unshakable. Such reliability becomes your most respected trait, born from the quiet labor of self-regulation. If this exploration into the mechanics of the psyche and strategic personal governance resonates with your quest for improvement, I invite you to become a part of this community. We will continue to dissect the complex layers of human behavior and internal command in subsequent analyses. Joining us ensures you remain aligned with these principles of high-level discipline and intellectual rigor. Before you move on with your day, pause and scrutinize your most recent experience with stress. Contemplate the last instance where you felt truly burdened by a situation. Looking back with clinical objectivity, ask yourself, was the crushing weight actually present in the physical space around you? Or was it merely the accelerating rhythm of your own heart? The answer to that question reveals exactly where your work begins.